So here we go, the Voxel Effect preset for Cinema 4D, and doesn't look very impressive right now, and that is because I have to assign a shape first. You have some small instructions in the voxel null object, like create your null object and create your polygonal object, drag it into the shape field, activate the voxel effect, and this is what we will do now. First of all, what I advise you to do is create a new project and create your shape and animate your shape over there. In the teaser for the voxel effect, I set up my, let me show you. I set up my scene first with the car and, where is it? Like here. And I have my car over there and I animated it, and when I had this animation done and everything looked fine and the camera was animated, stuff like that, I then put in the voxels. So first create your animation and your basic shape, and they really have to be basic, so don't put too much effort in the modeling of your objects because they will be replaced in the end anyway. Keep the focus on the animation, and we will do this now. I will create a new project, and for this tutorial we will go with a simple... Let's take the torus object. First things first, you have to make this object editable, so you can't put this parametric objects into the voxel effect. So we make it editable by hitting C or clicking this button over there, and then we have a polygonal object. And we could then go ahead and animate it, but we won't do this now. We will get to the fun part and start with the voxel effect. I have it already open. I go into the voxel effect, select my voxel null object, hit Command C, so I copy it, switch back to my main scene and paste it. Then let's take a look at the options over there. D or activate the voxel effect. When I want to turn this thing on, it doesn't work. So I can't turn it on until I drag a shape into this slot over there. So I take my torus object and drag it into the shape field, and then I can enable the voxel effect like so. Once I've done that, I can hide my torus object so that we look at the voxels only. And you see, maybe you see it, I hope you can see it, that my performance is going down. And that is firstly because I have not the fastest computer, and secondly it is because of the cloner object. The voxel effect works with the MoGraph cloner objects, so in other words it creates a lot of cubes, even the ones you cannot see. They are in fact there. They are just scaled down to 0% so that they disappear, or in other words they only appear where the shape is. Yeah, you can say that. To get a bit more performance again, there are two options. First thing is you can switch to render instances. It gets really fast then, but the downside of this is that when you hit render you cannot see anything anymore, because that's the nature of render instances, right? You can only see them once you start the final render. So I will disable that again, and here they are. When you really have a lot of those voxel effects applied to your scene, like I had with the car, I had, let me think, two for the lights of the car, one for the main part of the car, and 4 wheels. So that makes 7, right? 7, 2 plus 4. Anyways, a lot of a lot of voxel effects, and it was not possible to scrub through time then. So I integrated this deactivate voxel effect button so that you can animate, like I said, first animate your stuff and then in the end turn on the voxel effect for rendering. So that was that. Next thing is the size of the cubes. You can only make the cubes half the size, you can make them twice the size. That is because you want to have them in the same matrix, right? If they were like 1.73 times the size, they wouldn't be in the same matrix like the other cubes. And obviously, the smaller the cubes get, the more performance is needed by your PC. So I will switch back to 1 and take a look at the next feature, which is the gap between the cubes. You probably know what this is. You can increase the size or decrease the gap between the cubes. So at the moment it looks like this, and to really see the gaps between the cubes, you either have to set lights and enable the shading so that the light takes effect, or you can just use the ambient occlusion effect, and then it looks really cool. So you have those black lines where the gaps between the cubes are. This is really a nice shading, I think. Okay, then you have the follow shape feature. By default it is checked on. So that means when I move my, let me switch on the render instances now. When I move around my torus object, that was not my torus object, this is the torus object. When I move it around, you see that the matrix, the voxels, follow it. And they follow it in a certain way. If you take a closer look, you see that the voxels don't take the distance between each row or column. They jump from one row to the next, so that you really have the this pixel effect when you move your shape or rotate it around. And when I deactivate this follow shape feature and then move the shape around, the torus object around, you see that it goes out of the matrix. So you can use this feature to animate in or animate out your object. So you either can move the shape around, or you can select the voxel null object and move it around. Basically the same thing. They are now independent from each other. And when I enable this follow shape box again, the matrix again follows the torus object. One thing that is important concerning the alignment of the matrix object is that the axis of your shape object always have to be in the very center of its geometry. Does that make sense? Let me show you just quickly in a separate scene. So, for example, if you have created an extrude shape like... Okay, let me just make an arrow, like so. Give me a second, I will just model a quick shape here. And make an extrude object and put this line in. You know the deal. Like so. Right, you have you are modeling your shape and you make it editable and it's connect and delete, and now we have one single polygonal object. And you want to apply the voxel effect to this shape you will get problems. You will have the matrix offset from the shape object, and that is because the axis of this arrow object is not in the very center. You see it at the bottom and slightly to the left. To fix this, you can go to select the object and then go to Structure, Axis, Center, and Axis Center Axis 2. And when you click that, the axis jumps right into the center of the geometry. And that is important. You have to do this before you apply the voxel effect. I just wanted to show you that. Okay, back to our torus object. Where were we? So, let's take a look at the color options. As said, by default the material is set up with a 100% luminance channel, so luminance only basically. You see that the color is turned off, so when you create a light and put it in there and render it out, you see that the light doesn't take any effect, and that is because the luminance channel is turned up to 100%. So when I enable the color option, the color swatch, and then I put down the luminance and hit render again, you now have the shading back, the shading of the light. So they are dark on the right and they are lit on the left side where the light is. By default it is set up like 100% luminance and no color, because I just like the way it looked without any light shading. But you can of course change these things, you can add reflections and stuff like that. It is only important is that you don't mess around with the with this shader gradient layers. There's a lot of stuff going on and working together with the Espresso. So if possible, don't make any changes to the gradient layers shader, which is the default shader that comes with the voxel effect. Okay, but do whatever you like, of course. So you can change the colors, you can add some colors like red. One thing that may be interesting is that this gradient over there is referring to the indices of the cloner object. So this is basically a clone object, right? And every cube has its own index. And the cubes are created in the, let's say, top left, and then they are added row by row to the bottom right, for example. So every cube from top left to bottom right has an own index, and based on this index these colors of your gradient are applied. And that is the advantage of that is that when you enable the mode dynamics, for example, and let the cubes fly around, they will always keep their initial color. You can create a little bit of a variation of the color by using the randomized luminance. For example, if I pull it up to 100% and then render, you see that you have totally dark cubes and very light cubes. If I turn it all the way down, it's just the colors you assign in the gradient. This is just to make it a bit more interesting by adding some color variation. So not color but luminance variation. Like so. The default is 15%. You can change the orientation of this gradient. By default it's horizontal. I can invert the direction, so now it is from blue to green, not from green to blue. And you can change it to vertical so that the colors change from top to bottom, like so. So we are almost through. Then you have the mode dynamics feature. There's not much to explain. You animate your object and then at a certain point in time you set a keyframe for the mode dynamics off, and in the next frame you animate it to check this box on and set another keyframe, and then at this point the voxels will fall down or do whatever you make them do. Let me just go into the shape and increase the size so we get a bit more performance. Then I hit the play button, and when I turn this on, you see that they at once start falling. And if I put a collision object down there, like this cube, for example, and apply a MoGraph rigid body tag, and like so, and then go back to my voxel effect and enable it, you see that they collide and all that fun stuff. So what if you wanted to take advantage of all those other cool Mo Dynamics features? By default they are hidden from this objects panel. You can't see the cloner object and other objects that are inside this voxel effect preset. In case you don't know how to make them visible again, you can go to Window, Layer Browser, and there you will find the Hide layer. And when you enable this M, you see that these objects reappear. They are locked at the moment. You need to unlock them first, and this is this little lock icon. So now you see all those objects behind the scene, you can say. Here's the voxel volume effector, which is, as said, for scaling down all cubes outside the torus object. Then there's this random effector, which makes the variation of luminance possible. And here's the clone object and the cube inside the cloner. And now you can go in and, by the way, here's the Expresso code. Let me just show you what's behind this. This is the whole setup for this preset. And you can now go into the rigid body tag and, for example, give the give it some initial velocity, for example, like so. You can add some other effectors, like, I don't know, formula effector. Don't know if that makes sense, but you can do this stuff. By default, all those things are switched off and hidden from the object panel. And as said, go to Layer Browser and make them visible and unlock them to make those changes as well. So we are almost through. Just one thing you have to be aware of, and that is what if you want to have more than one voxel effect in your scene? Like I had in the teaser with the car itself, then the four wheels and the lights all had a different color. What you cannot do, let's say that you have this sphere and make it editable and want to assign this sphere to another voxel effect, so you probably would go ahead and select it, control drag to duplicate it, and the problem is that by duplicating the voxel effect this way, so holding down control and dragging, Cinema won't create another material for you. You see that you still have only one voxel material down there. And if I let's say, let me undo this for a second, and let's make this first torus pure red so that we can identify it better. And if I hold down control and drag to duplicate it and assign the sphere to this new voxel effect and hide it from view, and then go into the one of those voxel effects and change the color to, let's say, blue, you see that it won't take effect because the initial voxel effect has lost its connections in the Expresso. You cannot duplicate your voxel effect this way. You have to do it by, let me just undo all this crap for a second. So, okay, here's the sphere again. And what you have to do is you have to hit Command C and Command V to duplicate. So copy and paste. And by that you see you now have a second material down there in the materials panel. And so this is going to be the voxel sphere, and this is the voxel torus, and I drag the sphere inside the slot, so replace the torus. Then I have two separate voxel effects, and both of them are referencing to their own material. So now you see I have a blue and a red one, and everything is looking fine. Okay, so keep in mind, copy and paste your voxel effect, don't control drag. Okay, I hope you can use this preset in your work. If you do, would be very kind to drop me a comment and post it on Vimeo, or drop me a comment. I love to see it, and that's it for today. We'll see each other soon, and have fun with the preset.